The Dravik breeding facility on Station Zeta 9 buzzed with its usual activity. Rows of incubation pods lined the walls, each one glowing with a soft amber light. Inside those pods, the next generation of Dravik waited to hatch. The facility workers moved between the pods with practiced efficiency, checking temperatures and monitoring vitals. It was routine work, the kind that happened every breeding season without incident. Until Pod 17 cracked open. The first hatchling emerged slowly, its tiny claws gripping the edge of the pod. Saren, the facility director, watched through the observation window with growing concern. Something was wrong. The hatchling scales weren't the deep crimson or emerald green that marked healthy Dravik genetics. Instead, they were pale. Almost white. Like old bone left in the sun. A second hatchling followed. Then a third. All of them albino. Saren's heart sank. In all his years running the facility, he'd seen maybe 2 or 3 albino hatchlings. They were rare, unwanted, and considered a genetic throwback to the Dravik's primitive ancestors. His people valued their rich, vibrant colors. It was a mark of status, of good breeding, of cultural pride. These pale creatures represented everything the Dravik had evolved away from. But there was another problem, one that became apparent within hours. These hatchlings were different in temperament too. They snapped at the handlers who tried to feed them. They hissed and lunged at anyone who approached their enclosure. The automated care systems triggered warning alerts constantly. These weren't just albino hatchlings. They were aggressive, hostile, and seemed to hate everything around them. The Dravik had strict protocols for hatchlings. They needed to be socialized within 60 standard days. Families would come to the facility, observe the young ones, and choose which to adopt into their clan groups. It was a time-honored tradition that had worked for thousands of years. But these 3? Nobody wanted them. The first family arrived on day 7. They were a prestigious clan from the inner worlds, looking for strong hatchlings to continue their lineage. Saren led them to the viewing area, hoping perhaps they might see past the color issue. The moment the family's matriarch saw the 3 white hatchlings huddled in the corner, she turned away without a word. Rejected before the visit even began. The second family lasted longer. They actually entered the interaction room, curious about whether the hatchling's temperament might outweigh their appearance. The largest of the 3, the one Saren had started mentally calling 47 from its pod number, launched itself at the barrier the moment the family appeared. Its tiny jaws snapped, and its claws scraped against the transparent wall. The family left immediately. This pattern repeated itself. 12 families. Then 15. Then 17. Each rejection made the hatchlings worse. They stopped eating properly. They fought with each other constantly. Their scales, already pale, seemed to lose what little color they had. The facility's behavioral specialists ran tests and scans, trying to understand what was wrong. Their conclusion was grim: early rejection trauma combined with genetic abnormality. The damage might be permanent. Saren found himself in an impossible position. Station protocols required hatchlings to be placed with families. If they couldn't be placed, well, nobody liked to talk about what happened next. The council would make a decision. A practical decision. A necessary decision for the good of their species. He had 40 days left to find these hatchlings a home, or they would be humanely terminated. The facility director stopped sleeping well. He'd spent his entire career helping bring new Dravik into the world, nurturing them, finding them homes. The idea of ending these 3 lives felt wrong, even if his culture said it was right. But what choice did he have? Nobody wanted cranky albino hatchlings. Nobody would take the risk. Then on day 23, everything changed. Ambassador Brooks arrived at the station with a small diplomatic convoy. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, only making first contact about 15 years earlier. They were strange creatures, these humans. Emotional in ways that most species found excessive. They cried over fictional stories. They adopted animals from other planets as companions. They seemed to feel things more intensely than logic suggested was efficient. The ambassador had brought her daughter, a girl named Lily who had just turned 11 Earth years old. While the adults conducted their boring trade negotiations and cultural exchange meetings, Lily was given permission to explore the public areas of the station. She carried a translator device clipped to her shirt and a tablet loaded with human entertainment to keep her occupied. Lily wandered through the commercial sectors, fascinated by alien architecture and the dozens of species moving through the corridors. She'd lived on 5 different worlds already in her short life, following her mother's diplomatic career. She was used to being the outsider, the weird human kid who didn't quite fit in anywhere. Other diplomatic children had friends, had stable homes, had places they belonged. Lily had temporary quarters and acquaintances who forgot her name as soon as her mother's assignment ended. She found the breeding facility by pure accident, following a group of Dravik citizens who were visiting to see the new hatchlings. The facility had a public viewing gallery where people could observe the young ones through reinforced glass. It was meant to generate interest, to help families decide which hatchlings they might want to meet. Lily pressed her face against the cool glass, watching a group of bright red hatchlings play fighting in their enclosure. They were cute in an alien, reptilian way. But then her eyes drifted to the corner, to a separate enclosure that seemed darker, more isolated. 3 white hatchlings sat pressed together in the shadows. They weren't playing. They weren't exploring. They just sat there, occasionally shifting position, their pale scales making them look like ghosts. As Lily watched, an automated feeder descended from the ceiling. All 3 hatchlings lunged at it viciously, snapping and tearing at the food with what looked like pure anger. Something in Lily's chest tightened. She recognized that anger. She'd felt it herself, moving from station to station, school to school, never staying anywhere long enough to matter to anyone. Being rejected over and over, even if nobody said it out loud. Being the weird one, the different one, the one nobody quite wanted around. An attendant noticed her staring at the albino enclosure. The alien approached, its translator activating. "Those are scheduled for evaluation," the attendant said neutrally. "They are not available for viewing appointments." "Why not?" Lily asked. The attendant seemed uncomfortable. "They are unsuitable for placement. A genetic anomaly. Please enjoy viewing our healthy hatchlings instead." But Lily couldn't look away. One of the white hatchlings, the smallest one, had stopped eating. It sat apart from the other 2, scratching at its own scales with its back claws. Over and over, the same repetitive motion. Lily had seen that kind of behavior before in stressed animals at the shelters back on Earth. "What's going to happen to them?" she asked quietly. The attendant didn't answer directly. "Please enjoy your visit to our facility." Lily stood there for a long moment, watching the 3 rejected hatchlings in their lonely corner. Then she made a decision that would change not just her life, but the future of an entire species. She turned to the attendant. "I want to meet them." The alien's translator made a sound like confused static. "I'm sorry, what?" "Those 3. The white ones. I want to meet them. How do I do that?" The attendant stared at the small human child as if she just asked to jump out an airlock. "That is not possible. They are dangerous. Aggressive. Unsuitable." "But I want to meet them anyway," Lily said with the simple stubbornness of a lonely 11-year-old who just recognized kindred spirits. "Who do I ask?" The attendant went to find Sarin, certain the director would refuse this absurd request immediately. But when Sarin arrived at the viewing gallery and looked at the determined human child, something in her eyes made him hesitate. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was asking because she understood. "Let me show you something first," he said. Sarin led Lily down a corridor away from the public viewing area. The walls here were plain metal, functional rather than decorative. They passed several closed doors before stopping at a security station. The director pressed his palm against a scanner and spoke in his native language. The door ahead slid open with a soft hiss. "Before you meet them, you need to understand what you're asking for," Sarin said, his translator rendering his words into careful English. "Come with me." They entered a medical observation room. Screens lined one wall, displaying data that Lily couldn't fully understand. But she could read the video footage playing on the largest monitor. It showed the 3 white hatchlings from different angles. In one clip, the biggest one threw itself against the enclosure wall repeatedly. In another, 2 of them fought each other viciously over a piece of food. A third clip showed a Dravik handler entering their space with protective gear. The hatchlings attacked immediately, working together to drive the handler back out. "They've injured 2 of my staff," Sarin explained, pulling up medical reports. "Nothing serious, but enough to require treatment. These hatchlings are not socialized. They trust no one. They attack anything that comes near them. 17 families have rejected them, and with each rejection, they've gotten worse." Lily watched the screens quietly. She saw the aggression, yes. But she also saw something else. The way the 3 always stayed close together. How they protected each other during the attacks. The way the smallest one would retreat behind the larger 2 when frightened. They weren't just mean. They were terrified. What happens if nobody takes them? Lily asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Sarin was quiet for a moment. "The council will make a decision. For the good of the species. These hatchlings carry genetic markers that our culture considers undesirable. And their behavioral problems make them unsuitable for placement in any clan. You're going to kill them, Lily said flatly. We will end their suffering humanely, Saren corrected, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with the distinction. It is our way. We do not allow defective genetics to continue. It has kept our species strong for thousands of years. Lily felt something hot and angry rise in her chest. They're not defective. They're just scared and alone. Nobody's given them a chance. Miss Lily, I appreciate your compassion. Humans are known for their emotional responses to suffering. But these are not human children. They are Dravik hatchlings with serious behavioral and genetic issues. They cannot be helped. Let me try, Lily said, turning to face the director directly. Just let me try to meet them. If it doesn't work, if they really are too aggressive, then fine. But you have to let me try. Saren studied the small human in front of him. She barely came up to his chest plates, and her species was soft, fragile compared to Dravik. If those hatchlings attacked her, she could be seriously hurt. The liability issues alone would create diplomatic nightmares. Ambassador Brooks would be furious. But something about Lily's determination reminded him of why he'd taken this job in the first place. He'd wanted to help bring new life into the world, to give every hatchling the best possible chance. When had he become someone who simply accepted that some lives weren't worth saving? I need your parents' permission, he said finally. And you'll need to sign liability waivers. And you'll never be in direct physical contact with them. Only observation through barriers. I'll get my mom to agree, Lily promised. Just don't give up on them yet. Please. Getting Ambassador Brooks to agree turned out to be harder than Lily expected. Her mother was in the middle of delicate negotiations and didn't appreciate being pulled out of meetings to discuss her daughter's sudden interest in alien reptiles. The conversation in their quarters that evening was tense. Absolutely not, Ambassador Brooks said firmly, not even looking up from her diplomatic reports. These creatures are dangerous, Lily. The facility director himself told me they've attacked handlers. They're scared, Mom. Nobody wants them. Nobody even tries to understand them. That's not our problem. We're here for 2 weeks while I finalize the trade agreements. Then we're moving to the Kepler station. You know how this works. And that was exactly the problem, Lily thought. She knew exactly how it worked. They'd move to the next station, the next planet, the next temporary assignment. She'd be the new kid again, the outsider again. She'd make surface-level friendships that would fade the moment they left. Nothing permanent. Nothing real. What if I don't want it to work that way anymore? Lily said quietly. Ambassador Brooks finally looked up from her tablet. She saw something in her daughter's expression that made her pause. Lily had always been adaptable, never complaining about their nomadic lifestyle. But now she looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Baby, what's this really about? The ambassador asked, her voice softening. I'm always the weird one, Mom. The human kid who doesn't quite fit. I show up, people are curious for a while, then they realize I'm leaving soon anyway, so why bother? Those hatchlings? They're the weird ones too. Nobody wants them because they're different. Because they're angry about being rejected over and over. I understand that. I know what that feels like. Ambassador Brooks set down her tablet. She'd known the diplomatic life was hard on Lily, but she'd convinced herself that children were resilient, that Lily was adapting fine. Now she wondered what she'd been missing. One visit, she said finally. Supervised, through barriers, with full safety protocols. One visit, and then we talk about whether this continues. Agreed? Agreed, Lily said, trying not to smile too widely. The next morning, Saren led Lily and her mother to a secondary observation room. This one was smaller, with reinforced transparent walls on one side. Beyond the barrier, the 3 white hatchlings' enclosure was visible. The creatures were sleeping in a pile in the corner, their pale scales rising and falling with breath. They're nocturnal by nature, Saren explained. But their sleep patterns have been disturbed by stress. They might wake up agitated. Lily approached the barrier slowly. She'd read everything she could find about Dravik biology and behavior the night before. She knew they had excellent hearing and could sense vibrations through the floor. They communicated partially through scent and body language. Their vision was better than humans but worked differently, processing movement more than color. She sat down on the floor, cross-legged, making herself small and non-threatening. Ambassador Brooks started to object, but Saren raised a hand, curious to see what the human child would do. For several minutes, nothing happened. The hatchlings slept. Lily just sat there, quiet and patient. Then the smallest one stirred, lifting its wedge-shaped head. Its eyes were pale pink, a startling contrast to the usual deep gold of Dravik eyes. Those eyes focused on Lily with sharp intelligence. "Hey there," Lily said softly, not moving. "I'm Lily. I know you don't understand me. That's okay. I just wanted to sit with you for a bit, if that's all right." The hatchling tilted its head, processing the unfamiliar sounds. The movement woke the other two. All three were now staring at Lily through the barrier. The largest one, the most aggressive according to the reports, rose to its feet. Its scales rippled with tension. Its claws extended slightly, scoring the floor. Ambassador Brooks tensed, ready to pull her daughter away. But Saren held up a hand again, watching intently. The large hatchling approached the barrier. It was a threat assessment, Saren recognized. The creature was trying to decide if this strange soft being represented danger or opportunity. Lily stayed perfectly still, her breathing slow and even. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled out her tablet, adjusted the volume to low, and started reading aloud. It was a story, some human fiction about dragons and friendship. Her voice was gentle, rhythmic, almost musical. The hatchlings watched, confused. This wasn't how anything had ever approached them before. Handlers came with equipment and authority, commanding them to behave. Families came with judgment and rejection. But this small creature just sat and shared sounds that meant nothing but somehow felt safe. The smallest hatchling moved closer to the barrier. Then the medium one. Even the aggressive leader edged forward, its threat display slowly relaxing. They sat on their side of the transparent wall, and Lily sat on hers, and for the first time since hatching, the three albino outcasts stopped pacing. Saren pulled up his datapad, checking the hatchlings' vital signs remotely. Their stress hormones were dropping. Their heart rates were normalizing. In 15 minutes, this human child had accomplished what weeks of professional intervention had failed to do. "Remarkable," he whispered. Ambassador Brooks looked at her daughter sitting peacefully with three supposedly vicious alien creatures, and she felt something shift in her understanding. Maybe Lily didn't need another temporary friend at another temporary station. Maybe she needed something to care about that was as lost and rejected as she sometimes felt. "How long can she visit?" the ambassador asked quietly. Saren smiled, his sharp teeth showing in what his species considered an expression of pleased surprise. "As long as she wants. I think we just found our impossible solution." Lily's first week with the hatchlings followed a careful routine. Every morning at 7 station time, she'd arrive at the facility with her backpack full of books, her tablet, and a thermos of hot chocolate. Saren would let her into the observation room, and she'd sit on the floor by the barrier. The three white hatchlings, which she'd started calling Ash, Bone, and Frost, would emerge from their sleeping area and take their positions on the other side of the glass. It looked peaceful from the outside. But Saren's monitors told a different story. Ash, the largest, still displayed aggressive postures whenever facility staff walked past. His stress levels spiked if anyone besides Lily approached. Bone, the middle one, had developed an eating disorder. He refused the automated feeders entirely now, dropping weight at an alarming rate. And Frost, the smallest, had gotten worse with her compulsive scratching. Patches of her white scales were raw and bleeding. "This isn't working fast enough," one of the behavioral specialists told Saren on day 9. "The human's presence calms them temporarily, but their core issues are getting worse. We need to consider moving forward with the Council's recommendation." Saren looked through the observation window at Lily, who was teaching the hatchlings human hand gestures. They watched her intently, mimicking her movements with their clawed hands. "Give it more time," he said, though he wasn't sure how much time he could justify. That afternoon, Lily made a request that everyone expected Saren to refuse immediately. "I want to go inside," she said simply. "Absolutely not," Ambassador Brooks said before the director could even respond. "Lily, we agreed on observation only." "But it's not enough, Mom. They're getting worse, not better. Frost is hurting herself. Bone isn't eating. They need more than just someone sitting outside their cage talking at them. They need real connection." Saren pulled up the medical data on his screen. "Your daughter is correct. The hatchlings are declining despite her presence. However, direct contact is extremely dangerous. Ash could seriously injure her with one bite." "So we make it safe," Lily argued. "You have protective gear, right? 4 handlers? I'll wear whatever I need to wear. But please, let me try. They're running out of time." The discussion went on for 2 hours. Behavioral specialists were called in. Medical staff evaluated the risks. Ambassador Brooks made 3 separate calls to human diplomatic medical advisors. In the end, it was Saren who made the final decision. The hatchlings would die without intervention. Traditional Dravik methods had failed. Perhaps this strange human approach deserved a real chance. The protective suit they gave Lily was designed for adult Dravik handlers. It hung awkwardly on her small frame, reinforced padding making her look twice her size. A helmet with a transparent face shield completed the outfit. She looked ridiculous, but she was protected against bites and claws. 15 minutes, Saren said firmly. At the first sign of serious aggression, you come out immediately. Understood. Lily nodded, her heart hammering in her chest. Now that the moment was here, she felt genuinely scared. What if she was wrong? What if they really were too far gone? What if she got hurt and proved everyone right that this was a stupid idea? The enclosure door slid open with a mechanical hiss. All 3 hatchlings jumped at the sound, immediately defensive. Lily stepped through slowly, and the door sealed behind her. She was inside their space now, breathing the same recycled air, standing on the same floor they'd been confined to for weeks. Ash moved first, positioning himself between Lily and the other 2. His crest rose, his tail lashed, his jaw opened to show rows of sharp young teeth. Every line of his body screamed threat. Lily's instinct was to back away, but she forced herself to stay still. "Hey Ash," she said softly, her voice muffled by the helmet. "I know this is scary. New things are always scary. But I'm not here to hurt you. I promise." She slowly lowered herself to the ground, sitting cross-legged like she did on the other side of the barrier. The movement made the protective suit rustle loudly. Ash flinched but held his ground. Behind him, Bone and Frost watched with wide, uncertain eyes. Minutes passed. Lily didn't move. She just sat there, breathing steadily, letting them get used to her presence in their space. Gradually, Ash's aggressive display faded. His crest lowered. His tail stopped lashing. He took one cautious step forward, then another, until he was close enough that Lily could have reached out and touched him. Instead, she pulled off one of her protective gloves. "Lily, no." Ambassador Brooks's voice crackled through the helmet speaker. But Lily ignored her mother. She extended her bare hand slowly, palm down, fingers relaxed. It was a gesture she'd learned from working with nervous dogs back on Earth. Non-threatening, offering her scent, letting the animal choose whether to approach. Ash stared at the hand. His nostrils flared, processing the unfamiliar smell of human. Then he did something that made everyone watching hold their breath. He pressed his snout against her palm, taking in her scent more deeply. His scales felt warm and dry, like sun-heated stone. "Good boy," Lily whispered. "You're such a good boy, Ash." The hatchling's eyes closed briefly at the gentle tone. Then Bone moved forward, curious and desperate. He pushed against Lily's other hand, seeking contact he'd been denied his entire short life. Frost hung back, still afraid, but watching intently. Lily sat with them for the full 15 minutes, just letting them explore her presence. She spoke to them constantly, her voice low and soothing. She told them about Earth, about her constant moving from place to place, about what it felt like to always be the outsider. And somehow, despite not understanding the words, the hatchlings seemed to understand the emotion behind them. When Saren finally insisted she come out, Lily felt like she was abandoning them. As the door opened, Ash made a sound she'd never heard before. Not a hiss or a growl, but something closer to a whine. A plea. "Don't go. Don't leave us alone again." "I'll be back tomorrow," Lily promised through the closing door. "I promise. I'll always come back." That evening, Lily presented Saren with a proposal she'd spent all night working on. It was a detailed care plan, written in the careful handwriting of someone who'd researched obsessively. She'd studied Dravik biology, behavioral psychology, and even dug up human studies on trauma recovery in social animals. "They need consistency," she explained, showing him her charts and schedules. "They need to know someone will show up every day. They need routine. And they need more than 15 minutes. I want to spend 3 hours a day with them. In the enclosure. Actually interacting." 3 hours. Saren looked skeptical. "That's a significant time commitment. Your mother mentioned you'll be leaving the station in a few weeks." Lily's face fell. She'd been trying not to think about that. Can't we stay longer? Just until they're better?" Ambassador Brooks, who'd been listening from across the room, closed her eyes. She'd been dreading this conversation. Her next assignment was already confirmed. They had 2 weeks left on Station Zeta 9, then they were due at the Kepler facility for a 6-month posting. She couldn't just abandon her career, even for her daughter's unexpected project. But that night, watching Lily sleep with a tablet full of notes about Dravik care, something shifted in the ambassador's priorities. She made several calls to her supervisors. She called in favors she'd been saving for emergencies. By morning, she'd negotiated a 3-month extension of their current assignment, with the option to request permanent placement if needed. When she told Lily over breakfast, her daughter actually cried. For the first time in years, Ambassador Brooks saw genuine hope in her child's eyes. The next weeks were transformative. Lily spent every morning with the hatchlings, gradually increasing their time together. She learned to read their body language with uncanny accuracy. When Ash's tail twitched twice rapidly, he was frustrated. When Bone's crest flattened completely, he was feeling sad. When Frost scratched her left side, she was anxious, but her right side meant she was just itchy. The breakthrough with Bone came on day 18. He still refused to eat from the automated feeders, growing dangerously thin. Lily tried everything, then finally had a simple idea. She asked Saren for permission to hand-feed him. The director was reluctant but agreed. Lily sat on the enclosure floor with a container of the protein mixture Dravik hatchlings needed. She held out a small piece. Bone approached cautiously, snatched it from her fingers, then retreated. She offered another piece. He took it faster this time. By the end of the session, Bone was eating from her hand steadily, his body pressed against her leg. It's not the food he was rejecting, Lily explained to Saren later. It's the lack of connection. Baby animals need to feel safe when they eat. The automated feeders were too cold, too mechanical. He needed to eat with someone who cared about him. From that day forward, Bone ate regularly, though he always preferred meals when Lily was present. Frost's scratching was harder to address. The compulsive behavior was deeply ingrained. But Lily noticed something. Frost scratched most when she was alone or when Ash and Bone were occupied with something else. It was an anxiety response to isolation. Lily remembered something from her research about deep pressure therapy. It was a technique used on Earth for anxious children and animals. Firm, steady pressure could calm an overstimulated nervous system. She didn't know if it would work on alien reptiles, but she had to try something. The next time Frost started scratching, Lily carefully positioned herself behind the small hatchling and wrapped her arms around her, applying gentle but firm pressure. Frost froze, unsure what was happening. Then slowly, gradually, her body relaxed. The scratching stopped. She leaned back into Lily's embrace, making a sound like a deep rumble. Contentment. After that, whenever Frost felt anxious, she would back up to Lily, asking for the pressure that calmed her racing thoughts. The raw patches on her scales finally started healing. 2 months into Lily's work with the hatchlings, something unexpected happened. A journalist from the Galactic News Network arrived at the station, researching a story about interspecies cooperation. Someone had mentioned the human girl and the rejected hatchlings. The journalist wanted footage. Saren was initially reluctant. The situation was delicate, and media attention could go badly wrong. But Ambassador Brooks saw an opportunity. If people across the galaxy saw what Lily had accomplished, perhaps it might change minds about not just these 3 hatchlings, but others like them. The footage went viral within 48 hours. Billions of beings across dozens of worlds watched a small human girl sitting with 3 white Dravik hatchlings. They saw Ash, once labeled violently aggressive, gently pressing his head against Lily's shoulder. They saw Bone eating peacefully from her hand. They saw Frost sleeping curled against her lap while Lily read aloud from her tablet. The contrast between the official reports of dangerous, defective creatures and the reality of these images was striking. The Dravik Council took notice. High Chancellor Varik was a traditional leader, someone who believed deeply in his species' cultural values. Genetic purity wasn't just policy for him. It was identity, history, the foundation of everything the Dravik had built. When he first heard about the albino hatchlings and the human girl, he dismissed it as sentimental nonsense. Humans were known for their excessive emotions. Of course they tried to save broken things. But the footage bothered him in ways he couldn't quite articulate. He watched it repeatedly, studying not just the hatchlings but the human child. There was no dramatic rescue happening on screen. No heroic intervention. Just a young girl sitting with 3 outcasts, offering them something his entire civilization had denied. Basic compassion. Simple presence. The belief that they deserved a chance. Varik made an unannounced visit to Station Zeta 9 3 weeks after the footage aired. He arrived with a security detail and official observers, intending to conduct a formal evaluation. Saren was given 30 minutes notice, barely enough time to alert Ambassador Brooks and Lily. When the Chancellor entered the observation room, Lily was in the enclosure with Ash, Bone, and Frost. She wasn't doing anything special. She was teaching them a game she'd invented, something involving rolling a ball back and forth. The hatchlings were playing enthusiastically, their movements coordinated and playful. They looked healthy. Happy, even. "I need to see them perform," Varric announced. "A demonstration of their capabilities." Lily looked up at the observation window, seeing the imposing figure of the Chancellor flanked by officials. Her stomach knotted with anxiety. She knew what this was really about. He wanted proof these hatchlings were worth keeping alive. One wrong move and he could order their termination despite everything she'd done. "What kind of demonstration?" she asked through the helmet comm. "A standard aptitude assessment. We use it to evaluate adolescent Dravik for military and civil service placement. If these hatchlings can pass even the basic levels, I will consider them viable candidates for continued life." The challenge was clear. Perform or die. Saren pulled up the assessment parameters on his datapad, his expression grim. The test involved complex problem-solving, physical coordination, and social cooperation. It was designed for Dravik who'd been raised in proper clan structures with months of training. These hatchlings had none of that background. They'd spent most of their short lives isolated and traumatized. But Lily had spent 2 months learning how they thought, how they moved, how they communicated. She'd watched them solve problems in their own unique ways. Ash was a strategic thinker, always aware of his surroundings and potential threats. Bone had exceptional memory and pattern recognition. Frost was creative, finding unexpected solutions to obstacles. "We'll do it," Lily said, though her voice shook slightly. "Just tell me what they need to do." The first test involved navigating an obstacle course. Barriers would rise from the floor at random intervals, forcing the subject to adapt quickly. Most young Dravik completed it in about 2 minutes with several mistakes. Lily studied the course layout on the screen Saren showed her, then knelt down with the 3 hatchlings. "Okay guys, here's what we're going to do," she said, knowing they didn't understand her words but hoping they'd understand her intent. She used hand gestures she'd taught them, combined with the body language she'd learned from them. Together, they'd created a hybrid communication system that worked despite the language barrier. The course activated. Barriers shot up immediately. Ash darted forward, his natural aggression now channeled into focused intensity. When a barrier appeared in his path, he didn't hesitate. He leaped, twisted midair, and landed smoothly on the other side. Behind him, Bone and Frost followed, but they were struggling with a particularly high wall. Lily couldn't help them directly without invalidating the test. But she taught them to work as a team. She made a specific clicking sound with her tongue, a signal they developed for cooperation. Ash heard it and immediately circled back. He positioned himself at the base of the wall, bracing. Bone understood instantly. He climbed onto Ash's back, then reached down to help Frost up. Together, all 3 cleared the wall. They finished the course in 1 minute and 42 seconds. No mistakes. Perfect coordination. The Dravik observers murmured among themselves. Varric's expression remained neutral, but his eyes had sharpened with interest. The second test was harder. It involved solving a puzzle that required manipulating objects in a specific sequence to open a food chamber. Most young Dravik needed demonstrations and multiple attempts. Lily showed the hatchlings the puzzle once, working through it slowly so they could observe. Then she reset it. Bone approached first. His memory was extraordinary. He recreated the exact sequence Lily had demonstrated, his clawed hands moving with precision. The chamber opened. But instead of taking all the food for himself, Bone stepped back and made a chirping sound. Ash and Frost came forward, and all 3 ate together, sharing equally. "That's remarkable," one of the observers said quietly. "Resource sharing without prompting. That's advanced social behavior." The final test was the one Lily feared most. It assessed threat response and decision-making under stress. A simulated predator, basically a scary hologram with sound effects, would appear. The natural Dravik response was either to flee or to attack aggressively. Neither response was considered optimal. The best candidates would assess the threat, communicate with their group, and choose a coordinated strategy. The hologram activated. It was designed to look like an ancient Dravik predator, something from their evolutionary past. The image roared, moving toward the hatchlings with frightening speed. Lily's instinct was to call out, to reassure them. But she forced herself to stay silent. They needed to handle this themselves. Ash's crest rose immediately, his body tensing for combat. But then something interesting happened. Frost made a low trilling sound, the noise she made when she was analyzing something carefully. Ash paused. Bone moved to the side, tilting his head, studying the predator from a different angle. Then he reached out with one claw and passed it through the hologram's leg. The three hatchlings looked at each other. Some wordless communication passed between them. Then, in perfect unison, all three turned their backs on the hologram and walked calmly to where Lily stood. They'd assessed the threat, determined it wasn't real, and chose not to waste energy on a false danger. Varric actually laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound that startled everyone in the observation room. They dismissed it. They actually dismissed the threat response test because they recognized it as simulation. Do you understand how sophisticated that is? The observers were pulling up data frantically. Standard Dravic adolescents almost never passed that test on the first try. The instinct to react to the predator image was too strong. But these three hatchlings, the ones labeled as defective and aggressive, had demonstrated reasoning that exceeded normal parameters. I want to speak with the human, Varric said suddenly. Directly. In the enclosure. Ambassador Brooks protested immediately. With all respect, Chancellor, that's highly irregular. My daughter is a minor, and she's not a diplomat. She's the one who accomplished this, Varric countered. Not you. Not the facility staff. Huh. I want to understand how. 10 minutes later, Varric stood inside the enclosure wearing protective gear. It was the first time in his 70 years that he'd been at eye level with albino hatchlings. They watched him warily, sensing his authority and power. Ash positioned himself protectively in front of Lily. You've done something remarkable here, Varric said, studying Lily's face. You took creatures my entire civilization labeled as worthless and revealed their value. How? Lily thought carefully before answering. She was aware that her words might determine not just Ash, Bone, and Frost's fate, but the fate of every future albino hatchling born to the Dravic species. I didn't do anything special, she said honestly. I just treated them like they mattered. Like they deserved a chance. Everyone kept seeing what was wrong with them, their color and their anger and their problems. I just saw three scared kids who needed someone to believe in them. But our experts tried to socialize them, Varric argued. Professional behaviorists with decades of experience. They failed where you succeeded. Why? Lily looked down at Ash, who was still watching the Chancellor with suspicious eyes. She reached out and gently scratched the ridge above his eye sockets, a spot she'd learned he loved. Because your experts were trying to fix them, Lily said quietly. I was trying to understand them. Varric's visit didn't end the way anyone expected. The Chancellor spent 3 hours at the facility, observing Lily with the hatchlings, reviewing all the medical data and behavioral reports, and asking questions that grew increasingly pointed. By the time he left, he'd made no official statement about the hatchlings' fate. That silence worried everyone. What they didn't know was that Varric had returned to his ship deeply troubled. The footage he'd seen, the demonstrations he'd witnessed, and his conversation with Lily had cracked something open in his worldview. That night, he pulled up records going back 200 years. Statistics on albino hatchlings. Numbers that had always been dismissed as irrelevant because those hatchlings were never given chances to prove themselves. The data was damning. Albinism appeared in Dravic populations at a steady rate of about 1 in every 3,000 births. Over 2 centuries, that meant roughly 40,000 albino hatchlings had been terminated or abandoned. 40,000 individuals who might have contributed to their civilization in ways no one would ever know. But the real crisis began 3 days after Varric's visit, when a radical group called the Crimson Claw published a manifesto across Dravic communication networks. They were supremacists who believed genetic purity was sacred, and they'd been watching the situation on Station Zeta 9 with growing rage. Their message was clear and violent: the albino abominations must be destroyed, and the human corrupting Dravic tradition must be expelled. Within hours, protests erupted on 7 Dravic worlds. Crowds gathered outside government buildings demanding the council uphold traditional values. The Crimson Claw organized demonstrations at breeding facilities, warning families against accepting defective genetics. They found sympathetic voices among traditionalists who saw any change to old ways as an attack on their identity. Ambassador Brooks received the first death threat on her personal comm at 2 in the morning station time. It was written in broken standard, but the message was unmistakable. Leave the hatchlings alone and get off Dravic territory, or face consequences. She immediately requested additional security and informed Earth Diplomatic Command of the situation. But Lily refused to stop her visits with Ash, Bone, and Frost. If anything, the threats made her more determined. She understood something the protesters didn't. This wasn't really about 3 white hatchlings. It was about fear of change, about people clinging to old beliefs because admitting those beliefs were wrong meant confronting generations of unnecessary death. Saren came to her on the 5th day of protests with difficult news. The council is meeting tomorrow to make a final decision. The pressure from the Crimson Claw and their supporters is immense. There are council members calling for your deportation and the immediate termination of the hatchlings. They are arguing that keeping them alive is creating civil unrest. Lily felt sick. So they're just going to kill Ash, Bone, and Frost to make the protests stop? I don't know, Saren admitted. But you need to prepare yourself for that possibility. That night, Lily couldn't sleep. She lay in her quarters thinking about the 3 hatchlings who'd become so much more than a project to her. They were friends. Family, even. Ash with his fierce protectiveness. Bone with his gentle intelligence. Frost with her creative problem-solving and the way she still backed up to Lily when she needed comfort. The thought of them being killed because angry people couldn't accept that they had value made her physically ill. At dawn, she made a decision that terrified her. She sent a formal request to the Dravik Council through her mother's diplomatic channels. She wanted to address them directly before they voted. Ambassador Brooks tried to talk her out of it, arguing that a 13-year-old human had no standing to speak before an alien government council. But Lily was adamant. If she was going to lose Ash, Bone, and Frost, she'd go down fighting. To everyone's surprise, Varric himself approved the request. The address would happen that afternoon via live holographic transmission, broadcast not just to the council chambers but to every major Dravik world. Lily would be speaking to billions. The hours before the transmission were a blur. Ambassador Brooks helped Lily prepare, offering advice on diplomatic language and political framing. But in the end, they both knew Lily couldn't give a politician's speech. She had to speak from the heart, the same way she'd connected with 3 rejected hatchlings. When the transmission went live, Lily stood in a small studio room on station Zeta 9. Her holographic image appeared in the council chambers on the Dravik homeworld, life-sized and clear. Hundreds of council members watched her, some with curiosity, others with open hostility. Varric sat in the chancellor's seat, his expression unreadable. Behind Lily's hologram, technicians projected live footage of Ash, Bone, and Frost in their enclosure. The 3 hatchlings were playing one of the games Lily had taught them, unaware that their lives hung in the balance. Lily took a deep breath and began. Honorable council members, my name is Lily Brooks. I'm 13 years old, and I'm from Earth. 3 months ago, I met 3 Dravik hatchlings that your society had labeled as defective. They were aggressive, traumatized, and scheduled for termination. Everyone said they couldn't be helped. But I didn't see defective creatures. I saw 3 kids who were scared and alone and angry because nobody wanted them. She paused, making sure the translation software caught up. Some council members shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, listening intently. I know I'm just a human kid. I don't understand all your traditions and history. But I understand what it's like to be rejected. I've moved 12 times in my life, to different planets and stations. I'm always the new kid, the weird one, the outsider. Every time I start to fit in somewhere, we leave. So when I saw Ash, Bone, and Frost being rejected over and over, I recognized that feeling. On the screens behind her, footage played of her first meetings with the hatchlings. Their aggression. Her patience. The slow building of trust. Your experts told me these hatchlings were beyond help. But they weren't broken. They just needed someone to believe in them. And once they had that, look what they became. The footage shifted to recent recordings. The hatchlings solving complex puzzles. Moving with coordinated precision. Demonstrating social bonds and intelligence that exceeded normal parameters. Here's what I've learned working with Ash, Bone, and Frost. Being different doesn't mean being less. It just means being different. Sometimes different individuals see things others miss. Solve problems in new ways. Bring perspectives that a society needs, even if it doesn't realize it yet. Lily pulled up data on her tablet, numbers she'd spent days compiling with Saren's help. You've terminated or abandoned 40,000 albino hatchlings over the past 200 years. That's 40,000 individuals who never got to show what they could contribute. How many brilliant scientists were in that number? How many artists, strategists, teachers, explorers? You'll never know, because they were killed for having the wrong color scales. The council chamber had gone completely silent. Even the hostile members were listening now. The Crimson Claw says I'm corrupting Dravik tradition. But I'm not asking you to abandon your culture. I'm asking you to expand it. To make room for individuals who look different but can still contribute. Because here's the truth, strength doesn't come from everyone being the same. It comes from including everyone who has something to offer, even if they don't fit the traditional mold. Lily felt tears threatening but forced them back. This was too important to break down. I'm asking you to pass a protection act for atypical hatchlings. Give them the same chance you give everyone else. Let them prove their worth instead of assuming they have none. And if they fail, let it be because they actually failed, not because nobody ever gave them an opportunity. She looked directly at Varric, though she was really addressing every council member watching. Humans almost destroyed ourselves once, fighting wars over differences in appearance and belief. We learned the hard way that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. You have a chance to learn that lesson without the bloodshed we went through. Please don't waste it. The transmission ended. Lily's hologram faded from the council chambers. She stood in the studio room, shaking, wondering if she'd said enough or if she'd just made everything worse. The council deliberated for 6 hours. During that time, something unexpected happened. The broadcasts of Lily's speech reached civilian populations across Dravic worlds. Public opinion began shifting. Parents who'd rejected albino hatchlings in the past started questioning their choices. Young Dravic who'd grown up accepting the old ways began organizing counter-protests supporting the Protection Act. The Crimson Claw tried to maintain their momentum, but their message of hate and fear couldn't compete with the image of a 13-year-old human girl advocating for the unwanted. Even traditionalists found it hard to argue against giving hatchlings a simple chance to prove themselves. When the vote finally came, it was closer than Varric had hoped but decisive enough to matter. The Protection of Atypical Hatchlings Act passed with 62% support. All viable hatchlings, regardless of coloration or appearance, would receive mandatory socialization support. Breeding facilities would be required to work with families to ensure placement. Termination would only be permitted for genuine medical unsolvability, not aesthetic preferences. Ash, Bone, and Frost were granted full legal status as wards under Lily's care, with Ambassador Brooks as the official guardian. The diplomatic posting at Station Zeta 9 was extended indefinitely. 3 years passed. Lily turned 16 and had grown into her role in ways she never expected. The facility where she'd first met 3 rejected hatchlings had transformed into something new. The Interspecies Behavioral Institute, they called it. Half the staff was human, half Dravic, with representatives from 6 other species serving as consultants. Ash, Bone, and Frost were no longer hatchlings. They were young adults now, each finding their place in this new world they'd helped create. Ash headed security for the Institute, his natural protective instincts channeled into keeping vulnerable hatchlings safe. Bone worked in communications, his gift for language and pattern recognition making him an exceptional translator. Frost ran the education program, developing innovative teaching methods for hatchlings who didn't fit traditional learning styles. Together with Lily, they'd saved over 300 atypical hatchlings. The Institute had become a model that other species studied, proof that compassion and inclusion produced better outcomes than rejection and termination. On the 3rd anniversary of the Protection Act's passage, a journalist asked Lily the question that everyone always asked. Why did you fight so hard for 3 alien creatures who weren't even your species? Lily smiled, watching Frost work with a nervous new hatchling across the room. Because they weren't creatures. They were people who needed a friend. And once I became their friend, how could I walk away? They taught me that being rejected doesn't define you. Being different doesn't make you less. What defines you is what you do with the chance someone gives you. She paused, then added, they gave me a chance too. A chance to finally stay somewhere, to build something permanent, to matter to someone. We saved each other. Across Dravic space and beyond, albino hatchlings grew strong, their white scales catching starlight. Each one represented a life that wouldn't have existed without a stubborn human girl who refused to accept that anyone was beyond saving. And in that refusal, in that simple act of compassion crossing species boundaries, she changed the course of an entire civilization. Sometimes the most powerful force in the galaxy isn't technology or weapons or ancient wisdom. Sometimes it's just one person believing in another when no one else will. That's the choice that changes everything.